Hi, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a Android and iOS mobile application using Ionic Framework. This particular application will demonstrate how to use ciphers, AES ciphers, in order to encrypt data and store it on the Firebase servers. So in particular, we're going to be creating a password management app where our passwords will be encrypted using AES and then synchronized with Firebase, so that way we can access them on all of our devices and platforms. So in order to use what we're going to do, we're going to need a few libraries. We're going to need to make use of the Firebase JavaScript library, which I have open in my web browser here. We're going to need to make use of the Angular Fire library, which is the wrapper for AngularJS. And then we're going to need to make use of the Forge crypto library. The only weird thing here for Forge is we are actually going to need to build it ourselves. There's no minified JavaScript binary file for us, so we will be building it. So let's go ahead and start things off by creating a new Ionic Framework project on your desktop. So let's go ahead and do Ionic start password app blank. So we're going to be creating a blank Ionic project. Alright, with that said and done, let's go ahead and jump straight into the Forge crypto library. We're going to need to go ahead and build that next. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use the URL. I'm going to copy the HTTPS clone URL on GitHub, and I am going to clone the repository straight to my desktop. So let's go ahead and navigate into the Forge library that we just downloaded. And what we're going to do is we're going to run npm install. And if you get a lot of errors like I did, just go ahead and use sudo. That's for Mac only. If you're on Mac and Linux. If you're on Windows, you won't have to worry about the sudo command. So let's do sudo npm install. It'll ask us for our password, and let's go ahead and enter it. Alright, so now that we have all the dependencies installed for Forge, now we can go ahead and minify it. So let's go ahead and run npm run minify. So I'll show you where it created the minified file now. So if we go ahead and we open up the Forge folder, let's go ahead and go into JS. It will have created a forge.min.js file. Let's go ahead and copy that and go into our password app, and then www, then JS, and let's go ahead and paste that library right in there. So now going back into our web browser, let's go ahead and download the Firebase JavaScript library. And then let's go ahead and download the Angular Fire library. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and move those directly into our project next to the Forge library. Alright, with that done, we no longer need the Forge repository, so let's go ahead and exit out of there. And we can go ahead and delete that folder. Now, using our text editor or IDE, whatever you're using, let's go ahead and open up the password app. So with the password app open, go ahead and find your index.html file. We need to go add a few things. So what we want to do is we want to add the following libraries above your app.js file. Let's go ahead and add the following here. Script source, and then we're going to add js/forge.min.js. And then we're going to also add, we need to add our Firebase libraries. So let's go ahead and do JS / what are they called here? JS / Firebase.js and JS / AngularFire.min.js. Alright, so now that we've got those added, let's go ahead and go back to our terminal here, and let's navigate into our password app project. And now let's go ahead and add the Android platform. If you are using a Mac, you can also add the iOS platform. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to be using strictly Android. Go ahead and clear that. So now we've got all of our dependencies added. The next thing that we want to do is we want to crack open the app.js file. Let's go ahead and make a few modifications here. We're going to clean this up a bit. Password app. And now we are going to create a factory, which will be, it'll be like a wrapper for the Forge library that we included. And this will make our encrypting and decrypting a whole lot easier. And if you've been keeping up with my other tutorials, you'll see that I've already done a tutorial regarding the Forge library. So this might be familiar to you. So let's go ahead and do the following. Password app.factory. Cipher factory. Alright, so we're calling our factory cipher factory, and in it we're going to say return, so it is going to return something. And we're going to have two functions. First one being encrypt, and that's going to take a message and a password. So let's go ahead and continue down the line here. We're going to work with the Forge library. If you care to do more research on it, the GitHub page does have a lot of useful information. I realized that I forgot to declare my IV, so let's go ahead and declare that now. So we're actually going to return an object. The object is going to hold our ciphertext, the salt, and the IV, all of which are necessary for decryption. Alright, so we've got our first function done for encrypting. It's just basically saying that we're going to encrypt using AES with the salt and an IV, and we are encoding everything to base 64, so that way we don't have to worry about crazy characters. It's all going to be alphanumeric with special characters like percent and equals. Let's go ahead and move on to decrypt. So that is going to take the cipher text that we just created in the encrypt. It's going to, we're going to pass in the password for decrypting, the salt that was used during encryption, the IV that was used during encryption, and the options, which is going to be whether or not we want to decrypt into hex format or string format. Very useful. So let's go ahead and continue down the line here. And I see that I forgot to start the cipher before I started updating, so let's go ahead and add that. Alright, let's go ahead and finish it. So we're going to say if options not equal to undefined, so that means options were passed. We're going to specify an output format. So if we pass in hex, then it's going to return hex format. Otherwise, we're going to say return cipher.output.toString. Alright, so our cipher factory is complete now. There's two more things that we need to add to this in order to be successful in our application. We need to add two string prototypes to our code. Let's go ahead and add the following. So we're going to add a toSHA1, which we're going to use to hash our categories for passwords as well as our passwords in order to create unique identifying values on Firebase. And since such a function doesn't already exist, we have to create one. Alright, so we just created our SHA-1 prototype. Now we need to create our 2-hex prototype. So we're creating a 2 hex because when we compare our passwords, at least for our master password, if we're incorrect and we receive some crazy characters, it may not be able to convert it into a string. So hex is usually the safest format. So a little background on what's going to happen here. We're going to be encrypting everything that we enter into this application using AES. And it'll be decrypted using a master password, but we will not be storing the master password in the Firebase data source. Instead, we will be taking a static string of our choosing. In this case, my string is going to be called authenticated, and then we're going to use the encryption. We're going to take the master password and we are going to encrypt the authenticated string and then store that in the database. So that way, when we come back and we try to log into our app, we are going to use the master password to decrypt the stored authenticated string. And when we decrypt, if it doesn't read authenticated, that means that we entered the incorrect password. However, if we decrypt and it says authenticated, then we're good and we can enter, and we know that our master password will be successful in decrypting all of the rest of our passwords. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to start creating our various screens throughout our application. So we're going to be making use of what already ships with Ionic, which is the AngularJS UI router. The UI router, we're going to have a screen for unlocking the application, for registering a new master password. We're going to add a screen for signing in or registering to Firebase. We are going to create a screen for viewing the password categories, a screen for viewing all the passwords to a particular category. We're going to create a screen for creating a password, and finally creating a screen for viewing a password. So the first thing that we want to do is inside of our app.js file, which we're currently in, we want to add a config method to our Angular module. And that can be done like this. I forgot one method or one directive here. Alright, so inside this method we want to go ahead and declare each state that is going to appear throughout our application. And by state, you can think of that kind of like a view or a template. We're going to create a locked state. Now you can see that we haven't yet created the templates. That's going to come next. We're just getting up to that point now. We're going to create a page called locked. We're going to assign it to the controller vault controller. And we're not going to cache this particular screen. So to save time, I'm going to copy and paste these states and then just do minor alterations, alter some changes. So instead of locked, we're going to say create vault. And this particular one is going to stay in the vault controller as well. And we don't need to cache this screen since we'll only be visiting it one time. Or we do need to cache it. We're going to do that because we're only going to be visiting one time. Sorry. Alright, the next screen is going to be Firebase. It's going to have its own controller. We can go ahead and cache it. The next screen will be categories. And we don't need to cache this, or we can cache this screen. We're going to create a screen called passwords. And it's going to be called password list. Password controller, singular. This particular screen, since we're going to be viewing it more than one time in our cycle, it does need to be refreshed, so we're going to disable caching for this particular screen. We only have 2 screens left, so we're almost done here. New password. Now this is where things, you know what, things could actually get a little tricky starting up top. We'll get there in a second though. So this one is going to be new password. Password new. Password controller. This one we can enable caching again. And then our final screen, which would be view password. Alright, so there are a few things that we need to add to this. So after we sign in from the locked screen, we're going to end up at the category screen. So what we actually need to do is we need to pass the master password. We're not going to be storing it, but we're going to be passing it around. Because it's a lot safer to pass it around inside the app than it is to store it in local storage, in case your app gets compromised. So I'm going to pass the master password there. From the category screen, we're going to be passing the master password as well as the category ID. So let's go ahead and pass in the category ID as well as the master password. For the new password screen, we're going to go ahead and pass in again the category ID as well as the master password. And finally, for the view password, again, we're going to pass in the category ID, the master password, and then this time we're also going to be passing in the password ID for the particular password that we're viewing. So 3 parameters on that one. So now we do have our config. So it's time to drop down here. And we are going to edit our index.html file to make use of the views. So what we want to do is we want to take everything inside the Ion pane and we are going to scrap it. And instead we're going to replace it with the following. Ion nav bar, and we're going to give it a class bar stable. And we are also going to say Ion nav view. And that's it. That was easy. So now we can proceed on creating each one of our views. So there are quite a few. So let's go ahead and create a new folder in our www folder called templates. And then inside the templates folder, let's start creating everything that we had decided. So we are going to create a file called locked.html. create underscore vault.html. Firebase. Categories. Password list. Password new. And then finally, password view. Alright, so let's go ahead and start going down the line here. We're going to start with the locked screen. And we're going to add the following here. And we're going to explain what this function is when we get there, but we're just going to add it for now. So we're going to add a small little welcome message. We're going to say div class. We're going to be creating a list here, an inset list. And we're going to have a text edit, so that way we can enter our password. Alright, so we've got our edit there. And finally, we need a button for logging in. We're actually going to create a button bar because it's going to have a reset button in case we want to clear out all of our data. So after the list, oops, I went too far out. After the list here, we're going to create our button. We have an unlock button, and we are going to have a reset button. Oops. Alright, and that is everything that is necessary for our locked screen. So now let's go ahead and jump into our create vault. Lucky for us, we can use most of the code from our lock screen, so we're just going to copy and paste it. Let's find our create vault, paste it in. I'm going to call this create. We're going to leave the init. We can even leave the welcome. The only thing that we're going to do is we're going to remove the reset and change unlock to create. and we'll be passing in the master password into that as well. Alright, so now that we got those two out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into our categories view, and let's add the following. This time we're actually going to be adding a button in our toolbar. It's just going to be like an add button. Let's go ahead and give that a function. Alright. And inside of our content, we're just going to be doing a list. We're just going to be listing out all of the categories. We're not going to do an inset list, so we can go ahead and just use the Ionic way of doing this. And we'll get to this later, but we're going to be passing in, it's going to be, each category is going to be called item, and the name of the category is going to be called category. We're not done. So we need a little bit more to our ng repeat here. We need to be able to tell it where to go when we click on it. So we're going to add the following. It's going to go to our passwords state. And we're going to be passing in the category ID, which is going to be item.id. And we're going to be passing in the master password, which is going to be master password. So just like that, we have the category screen done. So let's go ahead and copy that, because we can recycle a lot of this in our upcoming screens. So let's go to our password list, change this to passwords. Again, we can keep the add. And in this scenario, we're going to have two buttons here in the toolbar. We're going to have a write button, which is going to be responsible for adding, and we're also going to have a left button. So let's go ahead and add the left button. So one thing that I did forget is we do need to wrap the button in the Ion Nav button, so that way we can tell it what side to appear on. And this actually needs to just be button. So we'll go ahead and fix that on the other page in a second. Button class equals. Alright. So in here, let's go ahead, we can copy this. We'll make some minor changes to the left button. The left button is just going to be a back button. Ion arrow left C. And it's going to call a back method that we create. Alright, dropping down a little further in this file, now we need to make some minor changes to our ng repeat. We're going to say item in passwords. We're going to leave that as item, but in this case we're going to say password, and we're going to say title. And when we click on it, it's going to take us to the view password state. And for this particular state, we're going to be passing in the category ID, the master password, and we're also going to be passing in the password ID. But since this time the password ID is item.id, the category ID is going to be a little different. It's actually just going to be category ID because we're going to be setting that in our controller. Alright, so this page looks good. Let's go back to our category screen so that way we can make that fix here. I'm just going to copy it so that way I can paste it. Don't forget to change this to right. Alright, so the next screen that we want to visit is the screen for actually creating a password. So let's go ahead. We can get away with copying the screen that we just did, which was password list. I'm going to copy that. We're going to go to password view and paste it in. Call that password. We don't need to initialize it, so we're going to remove that. And we also don't need a right button. We're not going to be adding anything, but we'll keep the left button in case we want to go back. So we will be getting rid of the Ion list. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use the list that we used from the create vault, I think it was. Yep. Go ahead and copy that. We're going to paste that in our Ion content. Instead of a master password here, we are creating a title. It's going to be type text. We can actually go ahead and copy this list item. I'm going to do it twice because we're going to have one for username and then one for password. But for password, it's going to be of type password, so it's concealed. And then if we drop a little further, instead of our create, we're just going to call it save. And we're going to pass in everything. So we're going to pass in the title, the username, and the password. So our passwords are going to consist of very basic elements that you can expand upon yourself. So we just created the view password screen. Now we need to, let's go ahead and copy this. And we're going to go to password new, which I did backwards here. So this is actually supposed to be in the password new screen. So that's fine. We can go back into our password view. We've copied and pasted what we just did into password new.html. So let's go to password view. We are going to remove the button bar here. It's not necessary when viewing passwords. And we are going to exchange the labels with Ion items. So this one in particular is going to be password.title. We can go ahead and copy this. I'm going to say password.username and password.password. And that's all that's necessary for our view password screen. We also need to add a view function though for initializing. Alright. So I believe we have one screen left, which is the Firebase screen. So let's go ahead and for this particular screen, let's go back into our create vault, and let's go ahead and copy this code. We're going to copy the create vault, go to our Firebase screen, change the title, we don't need an initialization function for this. What we do need is we need another field, and we're going to change the field a little bit. So for the first field, it's actually going to be the username. It can be text. In this case, the username is the email address, but we'll get to that soon. And then we're going to take a password and just change the placeholder text to say password. And then in our button bar, we're actually going to have two buttons. We're going to have a sign in button, and we're going to have a register button. The login button is going to take, well, they're basically going to take the same commands here. Alright, so as of right now, your views are complete. There is one more thing that we need to add, which I believe we forgot to add it to app.js. Yeah, we did. So we need to add a semicolon here. We also need to add an otherwise statement. And this will tell our AngularJS UI router to default to a particular screen. In this case, the default screen is going to be called locked. The lock screen. Alright. So now that we've got all of our views, now we can jump right into the Firebase stuff. So let's go ahead and start things off here. Let's go back into our web browser and go to our Firebase dashboard. Please use your own Firebase, don't use mine. I'm going to delete it after this. So let's go into our security rules, and you want to make sure that your security rules match mine. So in case you can't see it, I'm going to copy it into my text editor where the font is a little larger. Paste it in here. And this is basically saying that everyone will be able to write to the users node, but only the authorized user will be able to read. So only the user that is logged in will be able to read the passwords. And this will allow us to create new users as well based on this logic. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm not going to save it. The next thing we need to do in the Firebase dashboard is we need to go down to login and auth, and we need to enable username, email and password authentication. And this will allow us to create accounts without using Facebook or Twitter or any of those stuff. So the next thing we want to do is we want to start adding our controllers where all the good stuff happens. So let's go ahead and go back into our app.js file because we're going to be adding the controllers now. We're going to go ahead and add it right above the cipher factory. You can choose to add it wherever you want. This is just preference of mine. We're going to start off by going down the line from our config. So we're going to make a vault controller, then a Firebase controller, then a category, and then finally a password controller. So starting with the vault controller, we want to do password app.controller. Call that vault controller. And we are going to pass in a few things to the controller. We're going to pass in the scope, state, Ionic history, Firebase object, and cipher factory. If you've dabbled with Firebase before, you might be wondering what the Firebase object is. This is actually new as part of Angular Fire 1.0, which is their first official release. Previously this did not exist, but we are going to keep up with the trends here, and we're using Angular Fire 1.0 or higher. So the first thing we want to do in our controller is we don't want users to be able to hit the back button and return to any of the views in this controller. So what we want to do is we want to disable that. So we want to do Ionic history .next view options. And we want to say disable animate true and disable back true. So that means as soon as we navigate away from any of the views in our Vault controller, the history stack will be erased. And then when the user hits the back button, it'll just exit the app instead of return back to this view. So the next thing we want to do is, previously you might remember that we added Firebase equals null at the top. Well, at this point in time, we're going to change that. We're going to say new Firebase, and we're going to go ahead and pass in the Firebase URL. So in this case, I'm going to pass in mine. Please don't use mine, use your own. Do me a favor here. We're going to go ahead and paste it in with the trailing slash and save it. So our Firebase object is going to be ready for use. It's not AngularJS ready yet, but it is ready. And for the purpose of this tutorial, we are going to be using a mixture of the plain JavaScript library as well as the Angular Fire library. So it's going to be a mix. It's not going to be all one or the other. Alright, so now that we've got our Firebase set up, we want to first confirm that the user is authorized to use our application. If they are not authorized to use the application, then they need to log into Firebase. Again, this is a online only app that we're making, so Firebase is necessary in order to use the app. So we're going to say var Firebase auth equals Firebase get auth, and then we can say that if the Firebase auth exists, that means that we are authorized. Otherwise, we want to go ahead and navigate them. Alright, so if we're authorized, we want to go ahead and make reference to the various nodes in our structure. So we're going to say var user reference equals Firebase child. We're going to attach the users node and then the node for the particular logged in user. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to create a sync object, and that is going to pull down our node for use. And then finally, we are going to create a three-way binding for that object that we just pulled down. And we're going to bind it to the data property of scope. Now, you don't have to use a three-way binding. You can use the other commands of Firebase for setting, removing, and getting data. It's up to you. We're going to use a mixture in this tutorial, so don't worry, you'll see all the different ways. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and continue on creating our three three controller functions. So we're going to go ahead and create the unlock function first. We're going to be passing in the master password to this function. So the first thing that we want to do in all of our functions is we want to make sure that the sync object has downloaded all of the data before we try to use it. And to do that, what we want to do is we want to wrap it in a callback here. So sync object loaded, and then once it's loaded, we can enter this callback, the success callback. And now we can start doing our unlock code. So we're going to do decipher phrase. I'm going to use a cipher factory. Encrypt. And we're going to go ahead and use the three-way binding object that we created. So scope, data, master password, and then we're going to use the master password that we passed in. Sorry, we're not done with this master password part. We want to do .ciphertext because that's how our object is being saved. And now we can proceed further. Scope data master password salt. Just going to copy this. We're going to do IV. And then finally, we are going to pass in an object of our options, say output hex, because we want for this particular unlock function to return a hex. So let's go ahead and throw a semicolon on that. So the next thing we want to do is we want to do a comparison to make sure that our deciphered phrase matches our static text. And that'll confirm to us that we've entered the correct master password. So if decipher phrase equals, and then here we're going to use the 2hex prototype that we made. So if it equals, then we're good. And again, we're doing the 2hex here because if the password was entered incorrectly and our string is decrypted, we're going to get errors trying to convert it into a string. So 2hex is safe. We won't have any issues with that for this particular scenario. So if it's successful, we're going to go ahead and navigate away. We're going to navigate to the categories controller. And we are going to pass in the master password as a parameter. Alright, unlock looks pretty good. The next function that we want to create is the create function for creating a master password. So again, sync object loaded. And in this scenario, we're actually going to be just encrypting it. So we're going to say user reference child because we're currently in the node of our current logged in user. So we're going to enter the master password node. And then we're going to set a new object. In this case, our cipher object. So cipher factory encrypt. We're going to encrypt the string authenticated with the master password. And then we have a callback. So you might be wondering why in this scenario I decided to use the set method instead of the three-way binding that we created. I did this because the three-way binding isn't necessarily quick, and we need the ability to know when it is saved before we try to navigate away. Because in here, in this callback of completion, we're going to be navigating away. And if we navigate away before the sync has happened, we're going to end up with some trouble. So that's why we're doing the set, because we want to know when the save has completed. Then navigate away. Of course, you can add an error if an error occurs, and navigate away only if it succeeds. It's up to you. I'm going to assume that no errors are found here. The final function that we want to create is the reset function. So let's go ahead and say reset. And the purpose of this function is we've forgotten our master password and we want to wipe out all of the Firebase data because there's no way to recover. The only thing that we can do is reset. So let's go ahead and say user. We're going to go ahead and do our sync object. Now we don't need to do a sync object in this case, I'm sorry, because we're not actually looking to download any data. We're going to do user reference remove, and then error callback, or there's going to be a callback and it's going to be passed an error. So we can say if error, then console.error, and just display the error. Otherwise, we're going to navigate away. Alright, so you can see we've gone ahead and we've made our unlock, create, and reset functions as part of our Vault controller. And our Vault controller at this point is complete. So before we go ahead and start testing stuff, we're going to go ahead and create the Firebase controller here. So that way we can make sure that all of our login stuff is complete. And then we're going to go ahead and see what we've got. So let's go ahead and do a password app.controller Firebase controller. And in this particular controller, we're going to be passing in the scope, state, Ionic history, and Firebase auth. So this particular controller is going to contain two functions, one for logging in and one for registering. But like we saw in the Vault controller, the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure any following screens cannot make use of the back button, because we don't want to be able to return to the Firebase controller. So let's go ahead and do Ionic history. Next, view options. You know what? So let's save time. Let's just copy paste. All right. So let's go ahead and create our new Firebase auth object here. And it's going to be used for our register and login. So let's go ahead and start by creating a login function. So scope.login, username, password. The username in this case is going to represent an email address because we're using email and password authentication. So let's go ahead and do Firebase auth with password. And we're going to be passing in the email, which is the username, and the password, which is the password. And then we're going to hit the callback here. And if this callback was hit, we were good to go. So we're going to go to the next view, which in this case is locked. And we're going to this view because we're just logging in. We're assuming that the Firebase already has our master password for us. So let's go ahead and catch any errors. Alright, so we've just created the login. The register is going to look pretty similar. So the scenario behind the register is we're going to be registering a username and password, and then we're going to immediately be using it to log in with. So there's no need to log in after you register. It's going to do that for us. So let's go ahead and start with the following. Firebase auth.create user. It's going to take an object. This did change in one of the more recent versions of Firebase. Before you could pass in parameters, and now you have to pass in an object. So email, username, password. Alright, so in here, in order to get our login flow included with our register, we're going to return the Firebase auth with password, because we've registered a new user, we're entering the callback, and we're going to return out of the callback you'll see what happens. Say email, username, password, and then we can come down here and do our then. So upon successful login, we are going to navigate to the create vault, because we want to go ahead and create a new master password for use. And then again, we're going to catch any errors. And finish that off. So in theory, this should work out now. We've got a way to create a vault, log in. We've got our Firebase login and register. So now it comes down to testing it out. And right now we can go ahead and take a look at this in the web browser. It should be fine. So let's go ahead and open our file in the web browser. Go ahead and use Safari. Bring that over here. To start things off, I'm going to make sure that my history is clean, so we have a clean slate here. Alright, so with our clean slate, we enter the app and it immediately takes us to the Firebase login because we are required to use Firebase. So let's go ahead and create a new account. So we're going to say, I'm going to call it Nick at testing.com. We're going to give it a password 1234, and we are going to register. But let's view the logs just in case anything crazy happens. And hit register, and you can see that it registered us and took us to the create vault screen where we are going to create a new master password. In this case, I'm going to call it test. I'm going to hit create. And something happened. So it looks like we have an error somewhere in our factory for encrypting and decrypting. So this error happened on line 90, looks like line 92 or 158. Let's go start with 158. So it looks like we forgot the encode 64 part here. So let's go ahead and add a 64 there. Let's go ahead and we're going to clear our logs. We can go ahead and refresh. Let's go ahead and type in a master password again, test, and hit create. And you can see that it now took us to the unlock vault screen. So let's go back into our Firefox and let's go in to view our data. We're actually going to have two users here because I was playing around with this a little while ago. But you'll see that we created a user simple login 29, which represents username and password auth, and it created a node for master password. And you'll see that it's not storing our master password, it's storing the ciphertext and our IV and salt. So everything looked great so far. We can go ahead and try the login here. So we're going to say, well, we can't try the login because we haven't set up our categories controller yet. So at this point, we've confirmed that everything looks good. Now it's time to go ahead and create the categories controller, which will be the first signed in screen of our password manager. So let's go ahead and go back into our code here. Let's go ahead right below our Firebase controller, but again, you can place it wherever you want. Password app.controller, and then category controller, function, and we're going to be passing in the scope, Ionic pop-up, Firebase object, state params, and cipher factory. So this particular controller is going to have two functions. One is going to be for listing the categories, and the other is going to be for creating new categories. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and define two variables so that way they don't become undefined for later use. So we're going to say scope.masterPassword is state params, which is going to be our passed-in parameter, master password. The reason why we're setting that is because we're going to be passing this through every screen instead of saving it. We don't want to save an unencrypted password in our app. We just want to pass it in while the app is being used. The next item that we're going to create is a categories array. We're creating this because we can't do the ng repeat on our Firebase object based on how we structured it. So we first do have to translate it into an array, so that way we can use ng repeat. And we're initializing it here so we don't get any kind of undefined errors. The next step is we want to, again, make sure that we are signed into Firebase. Because if we're not signed into Firebase, we want to make sure that the user signs in. And again, so that way I don't have to type it out, just going to copy and paste it. But we are going to make some revisions after we copy and paste. So inside of the successful auth, we are auth. We're going to change this from user reference to categories reference. And then the rest can be the same. We're just doing this for cleanliness purposes. Categories reference, we're going to create a sync object again, and we're going to bind it to data. So now we can create the first of our two functions. We're going to call it list. And this gets called as soon as the view is opened. And it only gets called once. So we'll explain how to accomplish adding new ones soon. So we're going to start by saying sync object.loaded. And once we confirm that our data has been downloaded from the Firebase server, now we are going to loop through each category key in our structure. So we're going to say var key in scope.data.categories. And to make sure that we don't look at keys that are part of prototypes, we are going to see if scope data categories dot has own property key. And that'll give us only the keys and not any kind of functions or property data that might be bundled into this object. So now that we're sure that the key has been found, we want to translate it into our categories array so that way it can be looped through. So we're going to say scope.categories.push, and when we push it into this array, we're actually going to decrypt it first, because there's no sense trying to push in the encrypted data. We want to only show the decrypted stuff. So we're going to be passing in an ID, which is the key. That's going to be very useful. And we're going to be passing in the category. And the category is going to be cipher factory. Scope.data.categories, and then the key, and then the category. And before I finish typing this out, I'm gonna copy it because we're gonna use it a few more times here. Save us some trouble of typing. I'm gonna say cipher text. The next parameter is the master password, so state params.master password. We're gonna paste and say salt. We're going to paste again and say IV. And then in this particular case, we don't need options. Because our output, we want our output to be a string we know that our password is correct, and we have no risk of having the string be corrupt. So just like that, we do have our list function complete. We can now move on to the next function. So our next function is going to be called add. Now the add function is just going to create a pop-up for adding categories. We're not going to go to a new screen for this one. So like previously, we're going to say sync object loaded and then in here we're going to say Ionic pop-up prompt. Going to have a title that says enter a new category. Input type is going to be text. And then we're going to check out the callback on when we're done, when we hit a button. Alright, so the result is whatever is entered in the box. So because we don't want to worry about blank or undefined entries, we want to first check that data actually exists in a result. And then we want to make sure that the categories node actually is available in Firebase. So we're going to say scope data categories undefined. So it's equal to undefined, then we're going to go ahead and create it as an empty object. Alright, now we can worry about saving our data and adding it to the list. So we're going to say if scope data categories, we're going to hash the result string using our toSHA1 method. And then we're going to say equals undefined. So what we're saying here is we're checking to see if this particular category ID already exists in our structure. So if it doesn't already exist, then we're going to add it. Otherwise, we're going to ignore it. So scope data categories so toSHA1 equals, and we're going to set it equal to an object here. So we're going to say category cipher factory dot encrypt. We're going to encrypt the result, and we're going to encrypt it with the master password. Whoops. And we are going to say passwords equals empty object here. Alright, so now it was saved to Firebase, but we also need to add it to our list because our list is only called from the beginning here. We actually need to add it to our categories array. So still inside of the result not equal to undefined, we're going to say scope categories dot push, and we are going to push it in unencrypted here, but we are going to still keep use of the hash. Alright, we should be done. And if we did everything correctly, this should work out. So let's go ahead and give it a test run here. I saved it. Going back into our browser, let's go ahead and refresh it. Let's go ahead and try to log in with our master password. Remember, we set it to test. Unlock. And you can see we've made it into the categories view. Let's go ahead and click our plus button. We can see it shows our Ionic pop-up. Let's go ahead and create a new category called banking. Click OK. And you can see banking was added to a list here. Let's go back into Firefox. And you can see a categories was added here. And again, the category is encrypted. This is the hash to our category, and this is our encrypted category name. So every part of our app is going to be encrypted. So far, so good. We have the Firebase set up, we have the unlock and create master password, and now we have the ability to add new categories to our password manager. This brings us to our final controller. It's going to be a little longer than the other ones. It's going to be our password controller. So let's go ahead and go back into our app.js file, and let's go ahead and jump down and create a new controller here. We're going to call it password app.controller, password controller function, and we're going to pass in the scope, state param, Firebase object, state, cipher, factory, and that's it. So, our password controller is going to contain several functions. We're going to have a list function, a view function, a save function, and a back function. But before we do that, let's go ahead and create a few scope variables that will prevent us from getting undefined errors. So we're going to say scope master password, just like previously, because we are going to be passing the master password around. We're going to be creating a category ID. Because from the category screen, we have now passed a category into our password controller. And then finally, we're going to create a list, an array of passwords. Because like categories, we do need to translate the Firebase object into an array that we can loop through with ng repeat. So with that done, just like our previous, we're going to go ahead and copy our logic to see if we are currently authenticated with Firebase. We're going to change a little bit here. This is going to be the most in-depth we've seen so far. We are going to say category reference, singular, and it's going to be users, and then the user ID, and then categories, slash, and then state param, category ID. So we are going to, this category reference is going to reference a particular category. Then we're going to go ahead and create another one called passwords reference. And that's going to be, we're going to go ahead and copy the previous. And we're going to add to it. Alright, that looks good to me. So now we're going to drop down and we're going to change this to singular category. And we are going to bind the three-way binding to the category reference. Alright, now we're ready to start our first function. Scope list. Again, sync object loaded. Alright, so this is going to look a little familiar again as well. We're going to say var encrypted passwords, scope.data.passwords. We're going to loop through each of the password IDs because again they're going to be hashed. So for var key in encrypted passwords, again we're going to do the has own property to make sure that we're not getting prototypes. And then finally, what we want to do here is we want to list them all out. So scope.passwords.push, we're going to be pushing into our passwords array, an ID, and a password. The reason why we're doing parse here, and you'll see this when we create our password, but our password is actually going to be a serialized object. So we're going to serialize an object of password data into a string, and then we're going to encrypt that string. So in this case, we're parsing out the string. So cipher factory encrypt. I say encrypted passwords key, and I'm going to copy this again because it'll save us some typing. Alright, so we're going to do cipher text, comma, state params master password. You should be getting pretty familiar with this by now. Alright, now I'm going to paste what I have in my clipboard, and I'm going to say salt. I'm going to paste again and say IV. And then again, in this particular scenario, we do not need to put the options output because we are expecting a string, and we're expecting that our string is legitimate and not going to be corrupt. So let's throw a semicolon on that. And just like that, our list is complete. So the next function that we want to create is our view function. So we're going to say scope view equals function. Sync object loaded. You're probably getting pretty familiar with this. I'm going to say var encrypted password singular scope data passwords, and in this case, since we're at the view screen, we have now received a password ID state param. So that way we know which password to view. But it's encrypted, so now we need to just decrypt it. Not too bad. Again, we got to parse it out. Let's say we're going to say encrypted password. I believe that's what we just called it, right? We're going to copy this. I know it's not that much to type, but I'm going to copy it anyways. Say cipher text state params.master password. Paste from clipboard salt. Paste from clipboard IV. And again, our output is going to be expected in string format, so we don't need an options. So just like that, we now have our view function. We only have two functions to go, one of which is very small. So we're going to say scope save. And we are going to keep things simple and only pass in a title, username, and password. You can always get more complex than me. This is just meant to be a simple example. So sync object loaded. You know, we don't even need the sync object, because in this particular example, we are not gonna work with the three-way binding. Remember, I said I'm gonna alternate, so that way you get familiar with the different ways that you can do it. It'll be your personal preference in the end. So we're gonna go straight into Ionic pop-up. And we're gonna say, wait, we're not using an Ionic pop-up for this one. I forgot. We actually created a screen for this. So let's go ahead and start by saying password object. We're going to create an object out of the username and password and title. because remember, we're going to serialize it. Alright, now let's go ahead and remember we created a password reference up here. So we're going to say passwords reference child. In this particular case, we're going to navigate straight into our unique hashed ID. So JSON stringify password object. And now that we've got a string, we can use toSHA1. So that's the child that we're in. And then we can call set. And we're going to set the cipher factory Encrypt. And we are going to pass in the stringified object again. We are going to pass in our master password. And then we can enter our callback. And inside of our callback, we can then navigate away. Alright, so we're navigating back to the password list state. And we're doing that because we want to make sure that it is saved before we navigate away. So that was easy. We just saved it, we serialized it, we encrypted it, and we saved it. So our final function, and you'll be pretty pleased with this, is just our back function for navigating between screens. And to do that, you can just do Ionic history go back. Alright. So, in theory, we should be able to add passwords now. So let's go ahead and refresh. And let's see what happens when we click on this category banking. Hopefully no errors happen. And of course, errors happen. So what did I type? Oh, it looks like I probably used singular state param instead of plural. So this is in the password controller, and it says, I don't know, it's not telling me a line number. So we know it's in password controller. Yep, right there. Let's add an S there. So let's go ahead and clear the log. I'm going to refresh it. Oh, it's already in the passwords. So let's start from the beginning again. Since we got messed up on an error, let's go ahead and start from the home screen. Type in test, and unlock it. Go to banking. Still no errors. So let's go ahead and click to add a new password, and nothing happened. So I wonder what happened here. Let's see if the back button works. Cannot find variable Ionic history. We're getting all kinds of problems here. Let's see what happens if I refresh the screen. Yeah. So let's go back into our function here. Yep. Looks like I forgot to add Ionic history for one. But let's see why it doesn't navigate away when we click that add button. So let's go find our password list. Alright, it doesn't navigate away because we're trying to use, I remember we copied our code from the categories view. In this particular case, we're not using the add function anymore. So let's get rid of ngClick and swap that out with a UISRef. And then we can do the following. We can do new password. We can pass in the category ID. We can pass in the master password. And that should be it. So let's save that. Let's refresh it. See what happens when we click on the plus now. Alright, so good news. It took us where we needed to be, to our create password screen. Let's go ahead and click back. And it went back. So exactly the way that we wanted it. So let's go back in. And we're going to create a new password. We're going to call this Bank of America. We're going to call it bank user, and we're going to call it bank pass, and we're going to hit save. So you can see that it added it to our list of passwords. Let's go back into Firefox, and you can see that it has already created our password here in this particular category, which we know to be banking. So let's play around with it. Let's have a little bit of fun here. I know that the back isn't going to work because I remember I refreshed. That is the flaw of testing in a web browser. So let's go ahead and go back to our root here. Test, unlock. Let's create a new category called social media. And we're going to add a few passwords here. That's weird. We got an error here. Let's try to click it again. Alright, let's refresh. So that's weird. I've not seen that error before. So, well, let's just assume it's a fluke for now. So let's say Twitter user, Twitter pass, save. We're going to go ahead and add another one. That's weird that it saved it. It shouldn't have saved our password. So it seems to have been an issue with our web browser. It seems to be just a fluke of the web browser. So let's go ahead. I'm back in the social media. I've gone ahead and erased the two passwords. Let's go ahead and add them again. Twitter user, Twitter pass. Save it. It's added. Let's go ahead and add another password, Facebook user, Facebook pass, and added. So if we navigate back into our Firefox, you can see that we've got two passwords here. Both of them are encrypted. So you can see this. If some malicious user gets a hold of this data, they're probably not going to be able to do anything with it. Not without your master password, because this is AES is a pretty strong encryption algorithm. So going back in, let's go ahead and see what happens when we click on one of these. You can see, because remember, we've done nothing to hide our password when we view it, for simplicity. You can see that it's exactly what I had entered when I created these. So just like that, we've created a password manager app. So let's go ahead and go back into our, let's go ahead and run this on a simulator. This is where it matters, because we're creating mobile apps here. We're not creating mobile apps to run in web browsers. So let's go ahead and do Ionic build Android. Might take it a little while to run the first time. Alright, so built it, now we're going to install it. ADB install R. Alright, we install it to our simulator. In this case, I'm using Genymotion. Password app. Alright, so you can see, because this is the first time we're using the app, it wants us to log in with Firebase. So I think I used Nick at testing.com, and then 1234 is my password. So let's go ahead and log in. looks like it was the password and the username. So let's go ahead and type in our password here, test, unlock. You can see everything that we had just entered in our web browser is already there because we're synchronizing with Firebase, which is an incredibly cool tool. Everything syncs pretty much instantly between any device and platform, just like that. You can go ahead and add stuff. Let's go ahead and add blogging. You can try to add new passwords. It's as easy as that. So just a little rehash on everything that we've done, because I'm assuming this tutorial took maybe 2 hours. So I'm assuming that you've had a lot of time and this has been useful. But what we've done is we've created a password manager app that makes use of the Forge crypto library for making use of the AES cipher, which is a very strong cipher for encryption. We're making use of the AngularJS UI router for navigating between screens. We're using Firebase to store all of our data, so that way we can use it on any device that we pick up. We're using Angular Fire, which is the AngularJS extension set for Firebase, and that pretty much covers it. You can view a full written portion of this. I'm posting this tutorial to AirPair rather than my formal blog. But a lot of this material, all the different sections of this tutorial, I've blogged about previously on my personal written blog, and there are also videos to go along with them. So this tutorial is a little big, a little too long for you to pick up. You can find smaller segments that I've made.